of January, already 2024, and I'm here to give a tribute lecture about my brother. Now, this happened on 50 years ago as of the 21st of January, which was Sunday. So what I'm going to be telling you is something that happened 50 years ago, but I'd love to have it recorded because I think it's very important now, maybe even more than it was 50 years ago. So I was teaching at Indiana University, communication. I was in a basement apartment, and on that date, January 21st, I got a call from my father. Now, my father and brother were here on the island. I was in Indiana teaching. The call I got from my father that night, which was around midnight my time, 9 o'clock time here on the island, is a call that I pray that none of you ever get. It was a call from my father from the hospital telling me he had just found the body of my 24-year-old brother, Bill. Bill had just committed suicide. I was 26 and a half, his older brother. There were only 2 children. So Dad said, please, Chuck, come back to Catalina. I need you. The doctor then got on the phone and said, yes, Chuck, we do need you. Your father is 71. He has a lot of medical issues, and he is so upset about finding your brother that we're afraid that he may take his own life. So I am going to quickly sedate him, knock him out, put him to sleep, and hope that he doesn't wake up until you get home, because we have to have a member of the family here. My mother and father were divorced at the time. Bill was the only other sibling, so I was now his only blood relative. Now, I did say that it was midnight my time, and I was in bed, but I think you could imagine the last thing I wanted to do was to go to sleep. I was crying for Bill. I was wondering who's going to take over my classes tomorrow morning. Who do you call at midnight at the university and say, I'm not going to be teaching my 7 o'clock class tomorrow morning? How do I get the money together? I mean, I had all of these concerns. Now, my bedroom was on one side of this basement apartment. I had the living room next to me, and then, of course, the door that led to the hallway. And above the door, I had one of those security latches over it, metal. So while I was in bed trying to figure this whole thing out, I heard the security latch rattling. So I knew that somebody was trying to break into my apartment. And I remember saying to myself, boy, this is turning out to be a wonderful evening. Now, because I had so many papers for my students, I didn't have room to put them on the dining room table, so I had them all over my living room floor. Now I heard the papers rustling, so I knew that somebody had broken into my apartment. Now, don't ask me why I pulled the sheet up right underneath my neck like, boy, that's going to really protect me. And I was waiting to see who was going to come in to my bedroom. It wasn't a who, it was a what. It was a white haze. It settled at the foot of my bed. From there up came a white orb about the size of a volleyball. It swirled until it was eye level with me. I was still sitting up after being on the phone with Dad. We didn't have cell phones then, of course. And in the orb, I heard my brother's voice. I heard Bill's voice. I'll tell you later on what he said. But anyway, he talked to me. Well, I knew I was out of my mind. I knew that I wanted Bill to be alive so much that I made up this whole ridiculous story just because I wanted Bill to still be alive. So I didn't tell anyone about what happened because I was afraid they were going to have me committed. So nobody knew what had just happened. So the next morning, I took the first flight out I could from Indianapolis to LAX. I had an ex-teacher who met me there, rushed me to Long Beach, where they had a speedboat there to the port of Long Beach. They had a speedboat there to meet me because the boats in those days took 2.5 hours. I didn't have that much time. They rushed me over to the pleasure pier. They had a hearse there to meet me. They rushed me up to the hospital. As quickly as I could, I jumped out of the hearse, ran into my father's bedroom, or hospital room. He was still asleep. So while I was sitting there waiting for him to come to, I noticed at the sideboard of his bed a white piece of paper. On the white piece of paper was a straight line, a squiggly mark, and then the top, it looked like a ball with something in it. It didn't make any sense to me. Dad was the 1924 graduate of Caltech in civil and mechanical engineering. He was a draftsman, so he always drew things. So this is what he drew. So I didn't know what it was, but I was waiting for Dad to wake up. So when he did, you could imagine there was a lot of hugging, kissing, and crying for Bill. When things calmed down, I said, Dad, will you please tell me what you wrote on that white piece of paper? He said, Chuck, if I tell you, you're gonna think I'm out of my mind. I said, trust me, Dad, after last night, I'll believe just about anything. He said, right after I got off the phone with you and before the doctor gave me the shot to knock me out, these were his words, into my hospital room came a white cloud. It settled at the foot of my bed. From there came a white ball, about the size of a volleyball. He said, it swirled until it was eye level with me. And he said, in the ball, I saw your brother's face, and your brother talked to me. He said, I'm crazy, aren't I? I said, Dad, if you're crazy, join the club. Because at exactly the same time that Bill came to you in this form of a ball in the hospital room, he came to me at exactly the same time, 2,600 miles away in a basement apartment in Bloomington, Indiana. So I'm going to tell you what Bill said, which is to me more timely even now than it was then. He said, number one, he said, if I knew then what I know now, I never would have taken my life. He said, Chuck, I give you a commission. You have to let people know how much they are loved. So that is what I got from Bill. And so did Dad. But again, 2,600 miles separated us. Now, unfortunately, both of my parents, after Bill died, both came out publicly and said they wish it was me who had died instead of my brother, because they said that my brother had more to live for than I did. Well, I took care of both of them until they died, knowing I took care of my father for 7 years, I took care of my mother for a couple of years, knowing that every morning when I woke them up, or they woke up, they were hoping it was going to be Bill, but me. I mean, that really hurt me. After all, you know, after all I was doing for them, they wanted me to be dead and not Bill. So anyway.
Did you blame them for that? I mean, did you attach anything?
Well, I mean, the point is, everyone said your parents were obviously under a lot of stress, but still the words were said. I mean, I can't not hear those words. Even if I forgive them, I still know the words. So again, it doesn't make any difference now. They're both dead, of course. So anyway, things went along pretty well. I came back to Catalina. I was very happy to come back because after teaching in the Midwest for 4 years, I really missed Catalina. I love the Midwest, but it was time for me to stop teaching even after only 4 years. But I had no excuse to leave teaching. I would have been still teaching, I guess, if Bill hadn't died. So I had that as my excuse to leave teaching, to come back and take care of Dad, and I never went back to teaching again. I was working on my PhD at the time. Well, a couple of years ago, I would say about 7 or 8 years ago, something finally hit me, and it was extremely dramatic. I got a guilt feeling. I guess you would call it a panic attack. I suddenly realized that the fact that I'm on Catalina, that I have this title, that I'm able to meet wonderful people like I met you today, was only predicated on Bill killing himself, not being in the picture anymore. And remembering my parents' words wanting me to be dead, I took it seriously. And I hate to say this, I was ready to take my life. I just said, I can't take it anymore. I can't take the guilt of knowing that Bill had to die for me to have this life on Catalina since I came back from teaching. I don't know if you believe this, or I don't know if you believe any of this, but it's the truth. I was at the computer, contemplating how I was going to take my life. Now, the Holy Spirit came to me. Again, whether you believe it or not, it did. And I know his voice. He came to me. He said, Chuck, you and your brother didn't get along very well, did you? And I said, no, we didn't. He said, you remember your brother's words on January 21st, 1974. I said, I think about him at least 3 or 4 times every day. I've never got that out of my head. He said, your brother could have said something like, well, you